Modern adventure games love to place you in giant open worlds full of pointless side quests to pad out the gameplay time. The GBA didn't have the space or time for that, and I think it's why I find myself returning to this classic console so often. A grand adventure on a small screen while sitting in a comfy space has to be one of my favorite ways to enjoy video games, and the Game Boy Advance is perfect for this. The GBA era of adventure games had to be creative and fun, or you just shut them off and play Pokemon instead. Luckily for us, the GBA was definitely not lacking in its vast library of these titles. These 10 games still hold up well today, even without nostalgia, and a lot of them are straight up better than some of the mainstream titles we're getting today. Everything about this game just bleeds creativity at every surface. Juka and the Monophonic Menace has you controlling a young alchemist named Juka on a quest to save his village. The game has you exploring a vibrant and unique world while solving puzzles and combating enemies with the game's original pattern recognition battle system. Trust me, this combat is special. You have to gather items around the world for potions that blends together a fun gathering and crafting system into an alchemy mechanic that can be used in and out of battle in various ways. The story is basic but does a good job of keeping you interested. The sound design is something special and it won't take long for you to see why. Overall, this game does everything right, but the way it uses its pixels to create this artistic flair to everything from its characters to its world design to its menus and UI that just blend everything together into this perfect little unique package. One of the greats on this system that's not mentioned often enough in retro conversations, Juka and the Monophonic Menace. One of the better examples of when living room console games got their own separate handheld versions and that version was occasionally better in every way is The Hobbit. You don't need to be a fan or know anything about The Lord of the Rings to enjoy this incredible game. A true adventure game in every sense of the word, the Hobbit game for Game Boy Advance follows the classic Hobbit storyline from the books. You play as Bilbo, solving engaging puzzles and some basic but swift combat. The game feels fluid to play and the art direction is perfect. The sprites are charming and suit this beautiful pixelated version of Middle-earth they've got on display all throughout the game. From farms to fields to forests to graveyards, mountains and all manner of dungeons, exploring this game and all it has to offer is a lot of fun, and I think when it comes to adventure games that encapsulate everything you think of when you hear that word, adventure, this is one of the games that does it the best, and it's still a great time even today. One of my favorite franchises of all time, but that has nothing to do with why this game is on this list, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance on the GBA is one of my favorites. Moving away from its CRPG origins, while not losing its Dungeons & Dragons type RPG elements, Dark Alliance was a treat to go back and replay. This game has all the best elements from Dungeons & Dragons, which if you know anything about it, it's about as fantasy adventure can get. You choose one of its classic archetypes for your class and explore through a fantasy land full of dungeons. Its combat is your standard hack and slash, but with super smooth movements and a variety of ways to play or approach fighting depending on your class. The graphics are about as good as they get when it comes to the GBA, the sprites especially looking like they took a lot of care when creating them. Stats, items, classes, all the basic RPG type elements are still here, and they mix well with the game's combat and basic exploration. The sound design is one thing I find lacking, as there isn't really any music when exploring, but the sound effects sound weighty and good when engaging with enemies or the game's interactable environments. Overall, this was a great experience back then, and it's still a great experience now. For mature fantasy adventure, look toward this game. Moving on to a very different style of dragons, we have Spyro Attack of the Rhinox. Traveling across the dragon realm with this little purple powerhouse has always been a great time. I know they exist, but I have never actually played a bad Spyro game, and Spyro Attack of the Rhinox does not break this trend for me. When playing a Spyro game, I get that I'm on a grand adventure feeling every time. While collecting gems, solving puzzles, and platforming around different obstacles make up the majority of this game, attacking enemies with Spyro's abilities and its exploration elements are still very well done. One of the few adventure games where I don't think the story really matters, it's all about the journey. Filled with mini games and side quests and that classic Spyro humor, this game showcases exactly why Spyro felt at home on the portable console. You choose from 8 characters, customize your choice to feel personal, set out on an adventure with an original story while collecting loot and slicing or shooting bad guys within a great real-time combat system, all with pretty graphics and a nice classic fantasy sound design, and you have Shining Soul 2. This is not an easy game by any means, but the fact you can play multiplayer and seamlessly have a friend join and help you made this feel balanced and fair. Even on your own, the game's many bosses are more than doable when properly equipping your character. The graphics have this timeless look many of these style of games had from this era, but that's not a bad thing. The game looks wonderful and plays just as well. An adventure game with lots of depth and really well done RPG mechanics, it's one of the best of these style of games to come out on the system. I didn't discover this game until recently, but I really like everything about it. Kong the Eighth Wonder of the World is not talked about enough when it comes to adventure games on the GBA. It gives me everything I want out of an adventure game. Well-designed characters, good-looking environments, a well-crafted story, a variety of puzzles and puzzle styles, combat that doesn't feel tacked on or secondary, difficulty that doesn't feel too easy. A lot of things about this game stand out and are memorable. Even the control system has its own style as you control your party members individually or all grouped together depending on the task at hand. Each one has its own unique mechanics and they control just as well as you would hope. Exploring temples and interacting with the game's many gameplay systems never feels stale, and the game kept my attention the entire way through. One of my favorite games on this list is Kong the Eighth Wonder of the World. Is this an action game or an adventure game? I don't really know how to classify this game, but it feels like an adventure, so I'm putting it on this list. Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines is far from the best game on this list, but it certainly holds up where a lot of similar games from this era don't. I wouldn't fault you for not really enjoying this one the same way I did if you're not a Terminator fan, but it certainly still does hold up. The game doesn't do any one particular thing really great, but as a sum of its parts, it's more than good. If you're a fan of Terminator, you will 100% like this game, but if you're not, then your enjoyment may vary. It's your basic run and gun with some added adventure elements, like scanning the areas for hidden objects, or going off the beaten path to find items. The variety of enemies and weapons was definitely one of its high points, and the one thing that threw me over the edge was that I recently discovered it has a multiplayer, which through original hardware or emulation, you can play this game with a friend. And trying that experience out was something I had never done before in a game like this, and made me realize a lot of its brighter spots and allowed them to shine more. Kind of a mixed bag, but still holds up, and I really just wanted to mention it. T3 Rise of the Machines is a fun little game, especially if you can get it for cheap and enjoy Terminator. The most obvious game on this list that always received high praises, but seems to be forgotten about the further we get from its original release, is Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. When talking about games that hold up, this is an easy choice because I don't know a single 2D Zelda game ever released that wasn't a masterpiece then and isn't still now. One of the most original takes on the Zelda formula, Minish Cap sees Link shrunk down to pixie size. We get all the traditional Zelda gameplay, but with his new shrunk down form, it opens up the game to all sorts of fresh ideas for puzzles and exploration. This may be one of the best Zelda games ever made, and yet I hear it mentioned the least. Original puzzle mechanics, a whimsical story that is actually interesting beyond just its opening moments, and some of the best looking pixel art on the entire library of GBA games is just some of the few reasons why this classic masterpiece still holds up now and always will. When a lot of people, including myself, hear the word adventure game, the first thing they normally think of is a fantasy or medieval style, some kind of fantastical world with some grand story. Not the case here with this game. Max Payne on Game Boy Advance is as action-adventure as it gets. Through its comic book style storytelling, it tells a grimy, down-to-earth story about a man out for revenge. No magic or fantasy here, except maybe for Max's slow-down bullet time mechanic, which he's known for, and is still present here in this game. This gritty shooter does a really good job of translating the console gameplay and making it viable on a handheld without losing any of its feeling or flair. Also, it's just nice to have such a mature adult story on a Nintendo console, normally known for family-rated style fun. The graphics are impressive and manage to keep that gritty feeling Max Payne has always been known for without compromising its style or quality. It's a unique look that just works really well when you see it in motion. If a mature, fast-paced adventure fighting through the streets of New York sounds good to you, then you're in luck because Max Payne on the GBA still holds up really well. Forgive me for this last one as I'm aware it wasn't good then and still isn't good now, but that's according to everybody else and I'm not everybody else. I don't understand the hate this game gets, and I already gave you 9 great games, plus I will include 2 bonus games, so allow me to have this one. Gauntlet Dark Legacy is basically Diablo on handheld before Diablo was on handheld. It feels smooth to play, the graphics and sprites look good, and hold up well even by today's standard. A balanced difficulty and some fun customization options to choose from, this game is just a watered down Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, but not in a way that serves the game negatively. Straightforward and fun, you explore, fight, collect things, and repeat. Multiplayer modes are available if you're into that, and I find its classes more enjoyable than your standard D&D classes. I've been replaying this game recently on my phone through emulation at work, and I find it's perfect for quick but fun gameplay sessions. If you've already played a lot of the other games on this list and enjoy the fast-paced style of game that this is, then I don't think you can really go wrong with giving this game a try. It's cheap and it's still fun for me today, and for me that's all it needs to be. Probably objectively the worst game on this list, or the only game I could see people not liking at all overall, but I felt it was worth a mention. Before I end this list, I need to mention Metroid and Castlevania. Both these franchises have multiple games on the GBA, and they are all fantastic adventures. Probably the best of what the Game Boy Advance has to offer, but they are such obvious choices, I left them off the list and am mentioning them here at the end instead. They are two of the greatest franchises ever created, and if you haven't played them, that is where you should start. Metroidvanias, but very much adventure games, these are too obvious to mention on the list, but must be brought up as they are just that good. That concludes my top 10 adventure list, and I hope you were able to find a game that you either didn't know existed or are reminded of how great it is and go back and give it a try now. As I always say, whether you're playing these on original hardware or emulating or playing on NSO, these 10 games are definitely worth your time. No nostalgia glasses needed. So that's it. That's all for me. Thank you all for watching. I love you all. I'm out.